Let me tell you about a boy from a small town. A town so small you will not find it on most maps. A town with muddy streets and wooden houses and a slow river running quietly through the middle of it. This boy was not rich. This boy was not powerful. This boy did not go to a great university. He had no famous teachers. He had no important family. He had no money, no connections, no special advantages of any kind. He was, in almost every way, completely ordinary. And yet, 400 years after his death, this ordinary boy is the most famous writer who has ever lived. His words are spoken in every country on earth. His stories are performed every single night on stages all over the world. His name is studied in every school, in every language, by millions and millions of children. When you speak English, yes, right now you use words and phrases that he invented, words that did not exist until he wrote them down, phrases that came out of his mind 4 centuries ago and never left. His name was William Shakespeare. And tonight, I am going to tell you his story, not just because it is a beautiful story, though it is, but because if you are learning English right now, if you struggle to find the right words, if you wonder whether someone like you could ever do something great, then this story is for you. Because Shakespeare started exactly where you are, an ordinary person with a dream and nothing else. So stay with me all the way to the end, because by the end of this video, 2 things will have happened. Your English will be stronger, and so will your belief in yourself. Let us begin. Before I start, I want to ask you one small thing. If this story moves you tonight, if it teaches you something, or makes you feel something, or wakes up a dream inside you, please tap the red subscribe button. Just one tap. It is the smallest thing in the world. But for me, it means everything, because I make these videos for people like you, people who want to learn English, people who want to grow, people who believe that an ordinary life can become an extraordinary one. If you subscribe, the next story will find you, the next lesson, the next bit of inspiration, waiting for you exactly when you need it. And if you can, tap the like button too. It tells me to keep going. It tells me these stories matter. That is all I ask. Now let me take you back, more than 400 years, to a cold day in April, in the year 1564, in a small English town called Stratford-upon-Avon. It was spring. The cold of winter was just beginning to soften. The trees along the river were growing their first green leaves. The fields around the town were turning from brown to green. In a small house, on a narrow street called Henley Street, a baby boy was born. His mother held him close. His father stood beside the bed, looking down at his new son. They named him William. They had no idea, how could they, that this small, crying baby would one day be remembered long after every king and queen of their time was forgotten. To them, he was simply their son, a new mouth to feed, a new life to protect. The town they lived in, Stratford-upon-Avon, was a quiet country town. It was not a city. There were no tall buildings, there were no crowds, there were narrow dirt streets and small wooden houses, and a stone bridge over the gentle river Avon. People lived simple lives. They were farmers and traders and craftsmen. They woke with the sun. They worked with their hands. They went to church on Sundays. They knew all their neighbors by name. William's father was named John Shakespeare. He was a glove maker. He worked with leather, cutting and stitching it into fine gloves, which he sold in the town market. He was good at his work. He was respected in the town. In time, he would even be elected to important positions in the local government. William's mother was named Mary Arden. She came from a wealthy farming family. She was kind and strong, and she loved her children deeply. William was their 3rd child, but the first 2, both girls, had died as babies. In those days, this was sadly common. Medicine was simple. Many children did not survive their first years. So when William lived, when he grew strong and healthy, he became, in a way, their first true child, their hope, their joy. After William, more children came. In the end, there were 8 children in the Shakespeare house. The house was always full of noise, laughter, crying, footsteps running up and down the wooden stairs, the sounds of a big, busy family. But even in all that noise, William was different. He was quiet, in a certain way, watchful. While the other children played and shouted, William would sit and listen. He listened to how people talked. He noticed how they laughed when they were happy and how their voices changed when they were sad. He watched the faces of the grown-ups in the market. He saw anger and joy and fear and love written on the faces of the people around him. He did not know it yet, but he was already studying the one subject that would make him immortal, the human heart. I want to stop here, just for a moment, because there is something important in what I just told you. Shakespeare's greatest gift, the gift that made him the finest writer in history, was not a fancy education. It was not money. It was not connections. It was attention. He paid attention. He watched. He listened. He noticed the small things that other people walked right past. And here is the beautiful truth for you, my friend. Attention is free. You do not need money to pay attention. You do not need a university degree. You do not need anything except the willingness to truly look at the world around you and truly listen to the people in it. The next time you are with people, really watch them. Listen to how they speak. Notice what they feel. Pay attention to the human heart the way young William did, because the greatest writer who ever lived began, simply, as a boy who paid attention. And you can begin the same way, tonight. Now, let us go on. In those days, there were no televisions, there were no phones, no internet, no movies, no video games. So how did people entertain themselves? With stories. Stories were everything. People told stories around the fire at night. Grandparents told old legends to their grandchildren. Travelers brought news and tales from faraway places. And sometimes, wonderfully, magically traveling actors would come to town. These actors moved from town to town, performing plays in the streets and the inns. When they arrived in Stratford, it was a great event. The whole town would gather. People would crowd around to watch, and young William Small, wide-eyed William, would push to the front of the crowd. He would watch every movement of the actors. He would listen to every word. He would feel his heart pound as the story unfolded before him. He was enchanted. This magic, where a person could stand up and become someone else, where words could make a crowd laugh or cry, this was the most wonderful thing William had ever seen. A seed was planted in his heart that day. A small seed. A seed that would, one day, grow into the greatest body of work in the history of the English language. But for now, he was just a boy in a crowd, watching actors in the street, his eyes shining with wonder. When William was about 7 years old, he started school. The school was called the King's New School. It was a simple building with hard wooden benches and a strict teacher who did not tolerate laziness. The school day was long. It started early in the morning, sometimes at 6 o'clock, and lasted until evening. The boys studied for many hours, with few breaks. And what did they study? Mostly Latin. In those days, Latin was the language of educated people. It was the language of books, of scholars, of the church, of the law. To be educated meant to know Latin. So young William learned Latin. He read the great writers of ancient Rome. He read poetry that was over 1,000 years old. He read the stories of gods and heroes, of wars and love affairs, of tragedy and triumph. He read a poet named Ovid, who wrote about transformation, about people changing into trees, and stars, and animals. He read about ancient history. He read about the great myths of Greece and Rome. These ancient stories filled his mind. They fed his imagination. Years later, when he began to write his own plays, these stories would come back to him, and he would use them and transform them into something entirely new. But here is something important to understand. William was not the perfect, quiet student, always with his nose in a book. He loved the outdoors. He loved to walk through the green fields around Stratford. He loved to sit by the River Avon and watch the water flow. He loved to listen to the birds, to feel the wind, to watch the clouds move across the wide English sky. He played with his friends. He ran through the streets. He climbed trees. He lived the life of a normal, healthy country boy. But always there was something more inside him. A hunger for words, for stories, for meaning. He felt things deeply, more deeply, perhaps, than the people around him, and he was already, without knowing it, collecting the raw material of his future art, the joys and sorrows, the loves and fears of ordinary human life. But then, when William was still a boy, trouble came. His father, John, once a respected and successful businessman, began to face serious money problems. He had borrowed money for his business, but things went wrong. The debts grew. The income shrank. Suddenly, the Shakespeare family, who had once lived in comfort, found themselves struggling. There were days, it is said, when money was very tight, when the family had to be careful about every penny, when the future felt uncertain and frightening. Young William saw it all. He saw the worry in his father's eyes. He heard the strain in his mother's voice. He felt the heavy cloud of money troubles hanging over the family home. For a boy who had known comfort, it was a hard lesson. But here is what is remarkable. William did not become bitter. He did not become hopeless. Instead, he learned something that would echo through all his future work. He learned that life is uncertain. He learned that fortune can change in an instant. That a person can be respected one year and struggling the next. That nothing in this world, not money, not status, not happiness, is permanent. He learned that life is full of sudden falls and unexpected rises, of wheels that turn, lifting people up and casting them down. Years later, he would write about kings who fell from greatness into ruin, about fortunes lost and found, about the strange, unpredictable, heartbreaking nature of human life. And he understood it so deeply, he wrote about it so truly, because he had lived it as a boy, watching his own family rise and fall. This is another lesson for you, my friend. The hard times in your life are not wasted. The struggles you are going through right now, the worries, the fears, the difficult days, they are teaching you things. They are deepening you. They are giving you a wisdom that comfortable people never gain. Shakespeare's family troubles did not destroy him. They prepared him. And your struggles, too, are preparing you for something you cannot yet see. Even as a child, William had a special gift with words. He would make up little poems, little rhymes. He loved to play with language, to twist words around, to make them rhyme, to make them sing. He loved to act. He loved to pretend to be other people. He would entertain his friends and his younger brothers and sisters, telling them stories, playing different roles, making them laugh and gasp and listen. But no one in Stratford-upon-Avon imagined not for a single moment that this ordinary boy, the glovemaker's son, would one day write the most famous plays in the history of the world. To everyone around him, he was just William, a clever boy, perhaps, a boy who loved words, but still just a boy from a small country town. His big dreams were invisible to everyone but himself. And maybe that is true of you too. Maybe the people around you do not see your dreams. Maybe they look at you and see someone ordinary, someone small, someone unlikely to do anything remarkable. But they cannot see what is inside you. They could not see it in William Shakespeare, and they cannot see it in you. What is inside you is yours alone. Your dreams, your fire, your potential, and it does not matter, in the end, whether anyone else can see it. It only matters that you can. William Shakespeare grew up fast. By the time he was 14, he had read many books. He had listened to hundreds of stories. He had watched countless actors perform in his small town, and his father's money troubles were getting worse, not better. The respected businessman was now deep in debt. The family that had once lived comfortably was now fighting to survive. William saw it all, and he understood, more clearly than ever, that nothing in life is guaranteed. Not wealth, not status, not even happiness. But instead of growing fearful, William grew thoughtful, observant, creative. He was becoming a young man. And as he became a young man, something happened that would change his life forever. He fell in love. Her name was Anne Hathaway. She lived in a village just outside Stratford, in a beautiful farmhouse surrounded by gardens. She was intelligent. She was independent. She was, by all accounts, a strong and capable woman. But there was something unusual about this love story. Anne was 26 years old. William was only 18. She was 8 years older than him. In those days, this was uncommon. Usually, the man was older than the woman. For a young man of 18 to fall in love with a woman of 26 was unusual, even a little scandalous. But love does not follow society's rules. William was deeply, truly in love with Anne, and Anne loved him in return. And then something unexpected happened. Anne became pregnant before they were married. Now, in those days, this was a very serious matter. Society was extremely strict about such things. A child born outside of marriage would bring shame upon both families. So William and Anne married quickly. In November of 1582, at just 18 years old, William Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway. He was still so young, still trying to find his place in the world, still uncertain of his future. And now, suddenly, he was about to become a husband and a father. 6 months after the wedding, Anne gave birth to their first child, a baby girl. They named her Susanna. 2 years later, in 1585, Anne gave birth again, this time to twins, a boy and a girl. They named the boy Hamnet and the girl Judith. So by the age of 21, William Shakespeare was a husband and the father of 3 young children. Think about that for a moment. 21 years old, 3 children, a wife, a family depending on him completely. And here was the problem. How would he support them? His father's business was still struggling. William had no land. He had no title. He had no fortune. He had no stable job of any kind. He had no interest in becoming a glove maker like his father. That life was not for him. So what could he do? He had only one thing. He had words. He had stories. He had a burning, restless, unstoppable desire to create something, though he did not yet know exactly what or how. A young man with a family to feed and nothing but a dream. It is one of the oldest and most frightening situations in the world, and it is exactly where Shakespeare found himself at the age of 21. And now we come to one of the great mysteries of Shakespeare's life. Historians call it the lost years. Between 1585 and 1592, 7 long years. Almost nothing is known about what William Shakespeare did. There are no records, no documents, no letters, nothing. We know that in 1585, he was a young father in Stratford with 3 small children and no clear future. And we know that in 1592, he suddenly appears in the great city of London as a working actor and a rising playwright. But the 7 years in between, a mystery. No one knows for certain what he did, or where he went, or how he survived. But there are theories, fascinating theories. Some believe he became a school teacher. Since he was well educated in Latin, he might have worked as a private tutor, teaching the children of a wealthy family. Some believe he joined a company of traveling actors. Perhaps one of those very companies that had come to Stratford when he was a boy. Perhaps he left his town to follow the magic he had fallen in love with as a child, learning the craft of acting, traveling from place to place, performing on makeshift stages. And some tell a more dramatic story. They say that young William got into trouble, that he was caught hunting deer illegally on a rich man's land, and that he had to flee Stratford to escape punishment. We will never know which story is true. Perhaps none of them. Perhaps all of them, in part. But here is what we do know. Whatever happened during those 7 mysterious years, whatever struggles he faced, whatever skills he learned, whatever hardships he endured, by the end of them, William Shakespeare had transformed. He was no longer a small-town boy with a vague dream. He was a writer, an actor, a man with a craft and a fire and a destination. And that destination was London. I want to pause here, my friend, because there is something powerful in these lost years. We do not know what Shakespeare did during this time, but we know it was during this time that he became who he was meant to be. In other words, the most important growth in his life happened in the dark, in private, where no one could see. Not on a famous stage, not in front of crowds, but in the quiet, invisible, unrecorded years of struggle and learning. This is true for almost everyone who achieves something great. The world sees the success. The world sees the famous name, the great works, the triumph. But the world does not see the lost years, the years of quiet struggle, the years of practicing in private, learning in the dark, working when no one was watching and no one believed. You may be in your own lost years right now. Maybe no one sees what you are working toward. Maybe no one knows your dream. Maybe you feel invisible, unrecorded, unnoticed. That is not a bad sign. That is often exactly where greatness is born. In the quiet, in the dark, in the years that no one will ever write about, but that change everything. Keep working, even in the dark, especially in the dark, because your lost years are preparing you, just as they prepared him. Now let us follow young William to London. London, in the late 1500s, was like nothing William had ever seen. Remember, he had grown up in a small, quiet country town. Stratford had narrow dirt streets, a few hundred people, and a slow river. London was a different world entirely. It was one of the largest cities in Europe. Loud, crowded, dirty, dangerous, exciting, alive. The streets were packed with people, merchants shouting, horses clattering, beggars pleading, children running. The air smelled of smoke and food, and the River Thames, which was crowded with boats. There were grand houses and filthy slums side by side. There was wealth, and there was terrible poverty. And most importantly, for William, London was the beating heart of England's theatre world. This was the golden age of English theatre. New theatres were opening, acting companies were forming, playwrights were writing, audiences, thousands of them, rich and poor alike, were hungry for stories, hungry for drama, hungry for entertainment. It was a city full of ambition, full of opportunity, full of fierce competition. And into this city walked William Shakespeare, with no money, with no powerful friends, with no connections, with no fame. He was a nobody, an unknown young man from a small country town, arriving alone in the greatest city in England, hoping to make a name for himself among hundreds of others who wanted exactly the same thing. Most people, in that situation, would fail. Most people would be swallowed up by the great city and forgotten. But William had something the others did not. He had a depth of talent that was almost frightening. He had a fierce, unshakable determination. And he had a love of storytelling so powerful that it could not be stopped, not by poverty, not by competition, not by anything. So he got to work. He started at the bottom. He found work with small theatre companies doing whatever was needed, acting in small roles, helping behind the scenes, learning, always learning. And as he worked, he watched. Just as he had watched, as a boy, in Stratford, he studied how the great actors spoke, how they moved, how they held an audience in the palm of their hand, how they made a crowd of thousands fall silent, then burst into laughter, then weep. He studied the plays that were popular. He studied what worked and what did not. He studied the audience, what made them lean forward, what made them cheer, what made them throw rotten fruit at a bad performance. And then, slowly, he began to write his own plays. At first, he wrote simple things, entertaining plays designed to make people laugh, or to thrill them with action and adventure. But as time passed, William began to realize something. He could do more. He did not have to write simple entertainment. He could write plays that made people think, plays that made people feel deeply, truly feel, plays that asked the great questions of human life. What is love? What is power? What is justice? What is the meaning of our short time on this earth? He began to pour everything he had, all his attention, all his observation of the human heart, all the lessons of his struggles into his work, and people began to notice. By 1592, William Shakespeare was becoming known in London's theatre world. His plays were being performed. His name was being spoken. He was rising, but as always happens when someone begins to succeed, not everyone was happy about it. There was a famous playwright named Robert Greene. Greene was university educated. He was part of the established world of writers, and he looked down on Shakespeare. To Greene, Shakespeare was an outsider. A country boy with no university degree, daring to compete with his betters. So, Greene wrote an insult. He called Shakespeare an upstart crow, meaning a nobody, a common bird, who had the nerve to dress himself in fine feathers and pretend to be a great writer. It was a cruel, public insult, an attack on Shakespeare's background, his lack of education, his very right to be there. So what did Shakespeare do? Did he give up? Did he crawl back to Stratford in shame? No. He did the only thing that truly answers an insult. He got better. He worked harder. He wrote more. He wrote better plays than ever before. He let his work speak for him. And here is the beautiful irony of history. Today, 400 years later, Robert Greene is remembered for almost nothing except for the insult he threw at Shakespeare. The man who tried to tear Shakespeare down is now remembered only because of the man he tried to destroy. That is the lesson, my friend. When people insult you, when they look down on you, when they say you are not good enough, not educated enough, not worthy, do not waste your energy arguing with them. Do what Shakespeare did. Get better. Let your work answer them. Because in the end, the critics are forgotten. And the ones who kept working, kept creating, kept believing they are the ones who are remembered. But just as Shakespeare was rising, disaster struck. In 1593, a terrible disease swept through London, the plague. It was one of the deadliest diseases in human history. It spread quickly, through crowded cities, killing thousands. There was no cure. There was no real understanding of how it spread. People simply fell sick and died in enormous numbers. To stop the spread, the authorities closed all public gathering places, including the theaters. The theaters, Shakespeare's whole world, his livelihood, his art, were shut down completely. Suddenly, Shakespeare had no work, no stage, no way to earn money from his plays. For many writers, this would have been the end. But Shakespeare did not give up. If he could not write plays to be performed, then he would write something else. He turned to poetry. He wrote 2 long, beautiful poems. One was called Venus and Adonis. The other was called The Rape of Lucrece. They were serious works of art, elegant, sophisticated, deeply emotional, and they were a triumph. These poems made Shakespeare both rich and famous. They were read and admired across England. They brought him to the attention of powerful, wealthy people, including, it is said, members of the royal court. Even Queen Elizabeth I herself was impressed by his work. When the theatres were closed and his usual path was blocked, Shakespeare did not stop. He found another path. This, too, is a lesson. Sometimes, life closes a door. Sometimes, the thing you depend on is suddenly taken away. The plague closed Shakespeare's theatres. Something, someday, may close a door in your life too. When that happens, do not give up. Find another door. Find another path. Use your talents in a new way. Shakespeare turned a disaster into a triumph simply by refusing to stop. And when the plague finally passed and the theatres reopened in 1594, Shakespeare returned to what he loved most, writing and performing plays. But now he was richer, more famous, and more respected than ever before. From 1594 onward, Shakespeare's life entered its golden age. He joined a famous acting company called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. This was one of the finest theatre companies in all of England, and Shakespeare was not just one of their writers, he was a full member, a shareholder, an actor, and their greatest creative force. For years, he wrote play after play after play, and these were not simple entertainments anymore. These were masterpieces. He wrote about love, the most beautiful and the most tragic love story ever told in Romeo and Juliet. The story of two young people from feuding families who fall so deeply in love that they would rather die than live without each other. He wrote about ambition and guilt in Macbeth, the story of a man who murders his king to seize the throne and is slowly destroyed by his own conscience. He wrote about revenge and madness and the deepest questions of life and death in Hamlet. A prince, haunted by his father's ghost, struggling with the question of what it means to live, to die, to act, to be. He wrote about jealousy in Othello, a great and noble man, poisoned by lies and suspicion, who destroys the very thing he loves most. He wrote comedies that made people roar with laughter. He wrote histories about the kings of England. He wrote tragedies that broke people's hearts. And his understanding of human nature was so deep, so true, that audiences felt as if he was looking directly into their own souls. People came to his plays and saw themselves, their own love, their own fear, their own jealousy and ambition and grief. That is the secret of Shakespeare's greatness. He did not write about kings and princes as if they were far away and unreal. He wrote about the feelings inside every human heart, feelings that you and I still feel today, 400 years later. Love, fear, jealousy, ambition, hope, despair. These never change. And because Shakespeare understood them so deeply, his work never grows old. By the late 1590s, William Shakespeare was one of the most famous playwrights in all of England. The glovemaker's son from a small country town had become a celebrated artist in the greatest city in the land. But Shakespeare was not satisfied. He wanted more. Not more fame for its own sake, but more. More to create, more to achieve, more masterpieces, more greatness. And in 1599, he and his company did something extraordinary. They built their own theatre. They called it the Globe. Imagine it, a great, round, open-air theatre, 3 stories tall, made of timber and plaster, with a roof open to the sky. In the center was a large stage, jutting out into the audience. Around the stage, on 3 levels, were galleries where wealthier people could sit, and in front of the stage was an open yard where the common people, who paid just a single penny, could stand and watch, packed shoulder to shoulder. The Globe could hold up to 3,000 people. 3,000! Imagine the scene on the day of a performance. Crowds rushing through the streets toward the theater, vendors selling food and drink, the sound of thousands of voices, the excitement in the air, and then silence as the play begins. As the actors step onto the stage, as Shakespeare's words fill the air, and 3,000 people are carried away into another world. This was Shakespeare's kingdom. This was his home, his dream made real. On the stage of the Globe, he performed his greatest works. Hamlet, with its famous question that still echoes through the centuries. To be or not to be? Macbeth, dark and bloody and unforgettable. Othello, a tragedy of love poisoned by jealousy. Julius Caesar, a political drama of power, loyalty, and betrayal, with its famous warning, beware. These plays were not just entertainment, they were experiences that changed the people who watched them. They made audiences think about their own lives, their own choices, their own hearts. And night after night, the Globe was full. The whole city, it seemed, came to see Shakespeare's plays. The boy who once stood in a crowd, watching traveling actors in the streets of Stratford, now had his own great theatre, where thousands came to watch his words come to life. The seed that had been planted in his heart all those years ago had grown into something magnificent. By the early 1600s, Shakespeare was not just famous, he was wealthy. He owned a share of the Globe Theatre, so every time a play was performed, he earned money. His plays and poems were published and sold across England. He earned money from his acting, his writing, and his ownership in the company. At a time when most writers and actors struggled just to survive, when many died poor and forgotten, Shakespeare was living a comfortable, prosperous life. He used his wealth wisely. He bought property. He bought one of the grandest houses in his hometown of Stratford, a fine house called New Place. The glovemaker's son, who had watched his family struggle with debt, now owned one of the best houses in the town where he was born. Think of what that must have meant to him, to return to the town where he grew up, not as a poor boy, not as a struggling young man, but as a wealthy, celebrated success. To buy a grand house in the very place where his family had once fought to pay their debts. This was redemption. This was a dream fulfilled beyond anything he could have imagined as a boy. But even now, even with fame and fortune, Shakespeare was not finished. He wanted something even bigger. In 1603, a historic event shook all of England. Queen Elizabeth I, who had ruled for 45 years, who had supported Shakespeare and the arts, died. The whole nation held its breath. A new king came to the throne. His name was King James I. And at first, no one knew what this would mean. Would the new king love the theatre, as Elizabeth had, or would he disapprove of it? Would he support the playwrights and actors, or shut them down? Shakespeare and his company waited anxiously. They need not have worried. King James loved the theatre, and he loved Shakespeare's work most of all. In fact, the king did something incredible. He took Shakespeare's acting company under his own personal protection. He gave them a royal title. They were no longer called the Lord Chamberlain's men. Now, they were called the King's Men. The King's Men. This was the highest honor a theatre company could possibly receive. It meant they were now the official actors of the royal court. It meant they were protected and supported by the king himself. It meant they would perform for the most powerful people in all of England, in the royal palaces, before the king and his court. Think of the journey from a glovemaker's son in a small country town to the most celebrated playwright in England, performing for the king himself, with his company bearing the king's own name. It is one of the greatest rags to riches stories in all of history. And it happened because one ordinary boy refused to believe that his ordinary beginning had to mean an ordinary life. Between 1603 and 1611, Shakespeare wrote some of his deepest, most powerful plays. His work was changing. When he was younger, his plays had often been bright, energetic, full of youthful passion. But now, as he grew older, as he experienced more of life, more of fame, more of loss and disappointment, his work grew deeper, darker, more emotional, more philosophical. He wrote King Lear, a heartbreaking story of an old king betrayed by the daughters he trusted, who descends into madness and grief. It is one of the most powerful explorations of suffering ever written. He wrote The Tempest, a magical, beautiful story of an old magician on a remote island, learning, at the end of his life, to forgive his enemies and let go of his anger. Many believe this play was Shakespeare's farewell, his own reflection on aging, on forgiveness, on saying goodbye. His characters became more real, more human, more complex than ever before, because Shakespeare himself had lived. He had seen fame and fortune. He had known love and loss. He had buried people he loved. He had experienced the full range of human life. And all of it poured into his work, making it richer and truer with every passing year. But I must tell you something now, something sad. Because Shakespeare's life, like every life, was not only triumph, it also held deep sorrow. In 1596, years before this golden age, when Shakespeare was already becoming successful in London, a terrible thing happened back home in Stratford. His only son, Hamnet, died. He was just 11 years old. We do not know exactly what took him. A fever, perhaps. A childhood illness. In those days, such things were common and sudden. But imagine it. Shakespeare, far away in London, working, succeeding, rising, and then the news arrives. His little boy, his only son, gone at 11 years old. No success in the world can heal a wound like that. Some scholars believe that Shakespeare's grief over Hamnet flowed, years later, into his greatest play. They notice that Hamlet, written a few years after his son's death, carries a deep, aching sorrow about death, about loss, about a parent and child separated forever. The names are almost the same, Hamnet, Hamlet. We cannot know for certain, but it reminds us of something important. Even the greatest, most successful man of his age celebrated, wealthy, beloved by kings, could not escape the deepest sorrows of human life. Shakespeare knew grief. He knew loss. He knew what it was to have his heart broken, and perhaps that is why he could write about the human heart so truly, because he had felt everything, the heights of triumph and the depths of grief. This, too, is something for you to remember, my friend. Success does not protect anyone from sorrow. The famous, the wealthy, the celebrated, they suffer too. They lose people they love. They cry in the dark, just like everyone else. So, when you are suffering, know that you are not alone. The greatest people who ever lived knew suffering too. And often, it is through our suffering that we become deep enough, wise enough, human enough to create something that truly matters. By 1611, William Shakespeare had achieved everything a person could dream of. He was famous across all of England. He was wealthy. He was respected by ordinary people and by kings alike. He had written the greatest plays the world had ever seen. He had nothing left to prove. And so, in 1613, he made a decision that surprised everyone. He retired. For so many years, he had lived in London, writing, acting, directing, performing, competing, creating. He had given his whole life to the theater. But deep inside, something was calling him. Home. He missed Stratford. He missed the quiet streets where he had grown up. He missed the green fields and the gentle river Avon where he had walked as a boy. And most of all, he missed his family. So he packed his belongings and he left the great city of London behind, and he returned to Stratford to his fine house, new place, where he planned to spend the rest of his days in peace. And what a peaceful life it was! He would wake early in the morning and walk through his gardens, enjoying the simple beauty of flowers and trees and birdsong, the same things he had loved as a boy. He would sit by the fireplace, reading books, thinking about the long and extraordinary life he had lived. He would spend time with his daughters, Susanna and Judith, talking about life and love and the future. Sometimes, visitors would come from London, fellow writers and actors, to see the great man, to ask his advice, to sit in his presence. But mostly, he lived quietly. A wealthy, respected, contented man, at peace in the town of his birth. And yet those who knew him said that even in retirement, his mind never truly rested. They said he would sit for hours, lost in thought, sometimes whispering lines of poetry to himself. The fire of creativity never fully went out. It simply burned, now, in quiet. In 1616, something unexpected happened. One day, Shakespeare attended a dinner with some old friends. It was a joyful evening full of laughter and wine and good conversation. Old companions gathered together, remembering old times. But soon after that evening, Shakespeare fell ill. Some say it was a fever. Some say he caught a sickness from the cold weather. No one knows for certain, but within days, his health declined rapidly. His family gathered around him. They knew, though they could hardly believe it, that the greatest writer the world had ever known was leaving this life. On the 23rd of April, 1616, William Shakespeare died. He was 52 years old. It is a strange and beautiful fact that he died in April, the same month in which he had been born, 52 years before. His life began and ended in the spring, as the trees of Stratford grew their first green leaves. The world had lost a genius, but his words would never die. Before his death, Shakespeare had written something for his own gravestone. He knew that, in those days, old graves were sometimes dug up, and the bones moved elsewhere to make room for new burials. He did not want this to happen to him, so he wrote a short verse and epitaph to protect his final resting place. The verse asked, in gentle but firm words, that no one disturb his grave. It offered a blessing to those who let his bones rest in peace, and a curse to anyone who dared to move them, and it worked. For over 400 years, no one has ever disturbed Shakespeare's grave. Even in death, the power of his words protected him. Think of that. This man's words were so powerful that they have guarded his resting place for 4 centuries. That is the power of language, the power of words, chosen well and placed in the right order. It is the very power that you, my friend, are learning to use every time you study English, every time you reach for the right word, every time you try to express what is in your heart. Words have power. Shakespeare knew it better than anyone, and his life is the proof. When Shakespeare died, the town of Stratford fell silent. People gathered at Holy Trinity Church, the very church where, 52 years earlier, he had been baptized as a baby. The church was filled. Actors, writers, family, friends, and ordinary townsfolk who had known him since he was a boy. Tears were shed, prayers were whispered, and his body was laid to rest in the very town where he had been born. There were no grand monuments, no golden tomb, just a simple grave in a quiet country church marked with his own words. It might have seemed, that day, like the end of the story. A great man had died. He had been buried, and in time, surely he would be forgotten, as all men are eventually forgotten. But the world was wrong, because this was not the end. This was only the beginning. Shakespeare's body was buried, but his words refused to die. His plays continued to be performed first in London, then across England, then across the world. His books continued to be printed and read and studied. His name continued to be spoken. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. And something remarkable happened. Instead of fading away, instead of being forgotten, Shakespeare grew more famous with every passing century. His plays were translated into every major language on earth. Today, you can read Hamlet in Chinese, in Arabic, in Hindi, in Spanish, in Swahili, in Japanese, in almost every language spoken by human beings. His stories inspired countless other writers. Filmmakers turned his plays into movies. Composers turned them into music. Artists painted scenes from his works. His words entered everyday speech, and not just in English. People all over the world quote Shakespeare, often without even knowing it. When you say someone has a heart of gold, that is Shakespeare. When you talk about a wild goose chase, that is Shakespeare. When you say you are in a pickle, or that something has vanished into thin air, or that you have been waiting with bated breath, or that the truth will out, all of these phrases came from Shakespeare's mind. He invented or popularized over 1,000 words and phrases that we still use today. Think about that. 400 years after his death, when you speak English, you are speaking Shakespeare's language. His words live on, every single day, in the mouths of billions of people who have never even read his plays. He did not just write stories. He shaped the English language itself. But why? Why has Shakespeare lasted so long when so many other writers have been forgotten? The answer is simple. Shakespeare understood human nature better than anyone who has ever lived. He wrote about the things that never change, the things that are the same for every human being, in every country, in every century. He wrote about love and showed us that it can be the most beautiful thing in the world, and also the most tragic. Romeo and Juliet. He wrote about ambition and showed us how the hunger for power can corrupt even a good and noble heart. Macbeth. He wrote about betrayal and showed us that the deepest wounds often come from those closest to us. Julius Caesar. He wrote about uncertainty and doubt and the great questions of life and death, and showed us a mind struggling to understand its own existence. Hamlet. He wrote about jealousy and grief and madness and forgiveness and hope. He wrote about everything that it means to be a human being. And because human nature does not change, because you and I still feel love and fear and jealousy and hope, exactly as people did 400 years ago, Shakespeare's work is still alive. When you watch a Shakespeare play today, you are not looking at something old and dead. You are looking into a mirror. You are seeing your own heart reflected back at you by a man who understood the human soul more deeply than anyone before or since. That is why he will never be forgotten. That is why, 400 years later, his name is still spoken with wonder. So, that is the story of William Shakespeare, a boy from a small country town, the son of a glovemaker, a young man with a family to feed, and no money, and no connections, and nothing but a dream, and the determination to chase it. He faced hardship. His family lost their money. He married young and became a father young. He disappeared into 7 mysterious lost years of struggle. He arrived in a great city with nothing. He was insulted and dismissed and told he did not belong. The plague closed his theaters. His only son died. He knew grief and loss and failure, and yet, through all of it, through every hardship, every setback, every sorrow, he kept creating, he kept writing, he kept believing in the fire inside him, and that fire made him immortal. The glovemaker's son became the greatest writer in the history of the world. Now, my amazing friend, I want to talk to you, directly, personally, because this story is not really about a man who died 400 years ago. This story is about you. You have a dream. I know you do. Maybe you want to be a writer, an artist, a teacher, a leader, a business person, a creator of something. Maybe you want to master English and use it to build a better life. Maybe you have a dream so big that you are almost afraid to say it out loud. And maybe, like young William, you feel that you are nobody special. Maybe you come from a small town or a poor family. Maybe you have no money, no connections, no powerful friends. Maybe people around you do not believe in your dreams. Maybe they look at you and see someone ordinary. Maybe, sometimes, you doubt yourself. You feel afraid. You feel like giving up. If that is you, then listen to me very carefully. William Shakespeare was exactly like you. He was born in a small town. He had no rich family. He had no university degree. He had no connections. No one believed he would be famous. He had only one thing, a dream, and the courage to chase it, even when it was hard, even when he was insulted, even when disaster struck, even when he had every reason to give up. He chased his dream, and his dream changed the world. Now it is your turn. You have a fire inside you. I know you do, or you would not be here, listening to this, trying to better yourself, trying to grow. You have a story to tell. You have a voice that matters. You have a potential inside you that no one else can see, but that is real and powerful and waiting to come out. Do not let fear stop you. Do not let other people's doubts become your own. Do not let your ordinary beginning convince you that you are destined for an ordinary life. Because the truth that Shakespeare's life proves is that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. You are stronger than you think. You are more capable than you have been told. You are one decision away, one dream, one act of courage from beginning a story that could change everything. So start. Start today. Work hard. Pay attention to the world, the way young William did. Keep creating, even in your own lost years, when no one is watching and no one believes. Keep going, even when you are insulted, even when disaster strikes, even when your heart is broken. Because one day, far from now, your name, too, might be remembered. And even if it is not remembered by the whole world, it will be remembered by the people whose lives you touch, by your family, by those who come after you, by the younger version of yourself who once had a dream and dared to chase it. There is a line that Shakespeare wrote long ago that I want to leave with you tonight. He wrote, "It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves." Think about what that means. Your destiny is not written in the stars. It is not decided by fate or luck or where you were born or how much money your family has. Your destiny is in yourself, in your choices, in your effort, in your courage, in your refusal to give up. You hold your future in your own two hands. Just as a glovemaker's son from a small country town once held his. And look what he did with it. My amazing friend, we have come to the end of our story. I hope it has done two things for you tonight. I hope your English is a little stronger, that you have heard new words, new phrases, new ways of expressing the beautiful and difficult truths of human life. And I hope your heart is a little stronger too, that you believe a little more than you did before in the dream inside you and in your power to make it real. If this story inspired you even a little, then please do these small things for me. Tap the like button so I know that this message reached your heart. Leave a comment below and tell me, what is your dream? Say it out loud, write it down, let the world see it. Because a dream spoken is a dream begun. And let us inspire each other, read the dreams of others, and cheer them on. And subscribe to this channel, and turn on the bell, because we are on a journey together. A journey of learning English. A journey of growing. A journey of becoming the people we were always meant to be. I make these videos for you. For the dreamers. For the ones who refuse to give up. For the ones who believe that an ordinary life can become extraordinary. If you want more stories like this, stories that teach you English, and feed your soul at the same time, then this is your home. Subscribe, and stay with me. Your future is waiting for you, my friend. It is not in the stars, it is in you. Now go and make history. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, you are the next great storyteller the world has been waiting for. I will see you in the next video. Until then, stay inspired, stay curious, keep learning, and never, ever stop believing in yourself.